Welcome to From Stardust to Us, in depth conversations with thought leaders, artists, and spiritual activists, navigating the challenges of our times with integrity, joy, and purpose. I'm Bernice Marie Daly.
And I'm Linnell Hayden. Thank you for joining us today. We really appreciate our listeners. You can find us on YouTube, Buzzsprout, or any place where podcasts are found. If you enjoy our conversation, please help us reach more people by subscribing, liking, and commenting. So let's get into this week's conversation.
Welcome, welcome, and we're very happy to have Janet Roseman with us today. And if I may, I'd like to introduce you to our listeners. Dr. Janet Lynn Roseman is an associate professor in integrative medicine at the Dr. Kiran Patel College of Osteopathic Medicine, which is at Nova Southeastern University in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. She teaches courses in spirituality and medicine, art and medicine, and death and dying for medical school students. She received her first Joseph Moore President's Award for her work in oncology and spirituality from Lesley College and was a David Larsen Fellow in spirituality and medicine at the Kluge Center of Scholars at the Library of Congress. Dr. Roseman is also the founding director of the Sidney Project in Spirituality and Medicine and Compassionate Care, a medical education program for physician residents. Janet's publications include, amongst others, Dance Masters, The Way of the Woman Writer, and If Joan of Arc Had Cancer. Today we are discussing her hot off the press recent publication, The Eternal Bond, Daughters Honor Their Mothers on the Other Side, helping healthcare professionals and adult daughters navigate the complex journey of grief. Janet not only shares moving stories, original research, and tools for well-being, but she also assures us that your journey is unique and sacred. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. That was a beautiful introduction. I appreciate that. And thanks for
Well,
inviting me. I really appreciate
absolutely.
it, Linnell and Bernice. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. So we'd like to begin with a kind of general question of looking back on your life, thinking about yourself maybe when you were a youngster. It's curious that we find that sometimes we have a sense when we're a kid about something in our life that's gonna kind of feels important to us and other things. And so if can you think of early experiences where there might have influenced your life's choice of work or something that sort of impressed you in a certain way as a kid that I don't know, sort of stayed with you, maybe even in the sort of back of your mind? Sometimes there are things that kind of show up that we can kind of,
I
trace back or like, connect the dots in a certain way.
I would say I always knew I would write.
Ah,
I was the
okay.
kid that, whenever we had an assignment to write a paper, where everybody else was lamenting it, I loved it. I loved it. I love writing. I love doing research. My mom took me to the library when I was very young. So I was very appreciative and I really loved books. I love reading. I love being around books. I still love books. You can see my bookcase in the back. I have a huge collection and I love to go to bookstores. They're one of my favorite places, to go to. So I don't know that I ever said to anyone I will be a writer, but I always appreciated it and I always really enjoyed it and thought it was very interesting and reading, just reading and reading and reading was really great. But honestly, it wasn't until I was an adult and taking care of my mom and she became really ill that I became an advocate, and for compassionate medicine because of the way she was treated. So that led me on my journey, but that was, probably like 18 years ago. I was
Oh,
an
mhm.
adult.
Right,
And
right,
I had no idea that I would end up teaching in a medical school either.
right, right. Well, there's all these surprises at the same time. Well,
Yeah,
thanks for
that's for sure.
sharing that. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, Janet, as we were speaking before we started taping, your book, The Eternal Bond, Daughters Honor Their Mothers on the Other Side, is such a beautiful book and very accessible. I've really enjoyed reading it. It's not, intellectual, scientific doctor speak. It's very, people can just sit down and absorb it very easily. And there's a lot of very touching subjects within that book, such as what you just mentioned with your mother and your advocacy of wanting more compassionate care once you saw what she went through. And I really want to get into that. But first, I do have to mention another book that you wrote first before we get into this one. I was
Okay.
very excited when I read in the back of the book your other publications, the one on Joan of Arc. I'm a big Joan of Arc fan. So I kind of
Um,
perked up and I thought, oh, I have to ask Janet why you wrote this book. If Joan of Arc had cancer and you wrote it, if I'm remembering correctly, shortly after your mother passed, is that right?
yes.
And so what prompted that?
Well, actually, it was my mother
Okay.
that prompted it. I was familiar with Joan of Arc, like most people, just sort of a cursory understanding of her. And then I was a mess after my mom died, and I was living with my dad at the time. I had just come back from the Kluge Center in DC, and I couldn't do very much. And writing has always been my solace. Like I always felt safe and comfortable and protected. And one day, my dad like kicked me out of the house and just said, go do something, get out of the house. So I love to go to secondhand stores. And I used to do that a lot with my mom. So I went to this secondhand store. And before I went in, I was talking to my mom. And I got out of the car and I said, okay, if you're really with me and we're connected, give me a sign. So I went in the store and literally within 5 minutes, a picture fell at my feet, and it was a picture, large picture of Joan of Arc on a horse holding her sword like this, defiantly.
Mm.
And I thought, oh my God, that's so interesting. And I just became really interested in her story and her courage. And I went to the library and I read her trials in English, not in French. And I used her words basically to write this book because I thought about my mother's journey through cancer, and I've worked with a lot of oncology patients, and I thought about how strong these women were and resilient, and Joan became a model. And I wanted to give women something that would help them feel empowered.
Mm.
And Joan was
Oh,
the perfect model for
Yeah,
that.
she's
indeed.
just relentless in her courage.
Oh
Yeah.
my God,
And
yes,
Yeah,
really.
yeah.
and so young, and so
A
young.
teenager.
Yeah, yeah. And her reputation kind of swings from one side to the other. One minute she's fabulous and wonderful, and the next minute she's being burned at the stake. So it's quite a powerful story and
Really.
powerful image. In your introduction to your book, or The Eternal Bond, okay, you write about the mother-daughter bond, that it's mysterious and it varies for each woman, regardless of gender identification. So I wonder if you could expand on what that means for you, that this bond that you refer to as this eternal bond of the
Mhm.
mother and the daughter, and uh, you say that it's regardless of gender identification. And then, of course, was then what do you mean by that? And then the next question related is what about the bonds with sons as well? So if you could open that up a little bit.
Sure.
I'd be very
Well,
interested.
I included regardless of gender identification because of people who might be transgender, or and my publisher actually wanted me to write more about it, and I didn't feel qualified. I don't have that experience, so I can't speak to something I didn't experience. And in terms of sons, again, I can't really speak to that. I would assume that bond for many sons is extremely sacred and they have a unique connection as well. But it wouldn't be appropriate for me to talk about, yes, their bond is the same because I don't know that. And I haven't done enough research and I haven't talked to men. I've only talked to daughters. So I can only
Mhm,
speak to my experience as a daughter.
mhm, mhm. But there might be something about, and I'd love to read your next articles about this gender identification if you're, uh, however you define yourself, however you see yourself. If you do explore that more sometime, be sure to let us know.
Oh, I
The
will. I will.
thing,
As I said, I can't speak to that because that's not my expertise. So I
right.
wouldn't feel comfortable.
I understand that, yeah. But there was
Yeah.
something there, maybe intuitively or something that said, whatever this relationship is about, it's not
Yeah.
restricted. In some way, it is beyond the gender identification. Something there is stewing
Yeah, I
around, or at
think that's
least,
a good point. It's a profound connection.
mm,
I spoke to many, many women who had lost their mothers. I found comfort in that because I couldn't find anything that really helped me. I mean, I went to bookstores, I went to seminaries looking for religious background, even though I wasn't Catholic, I was just very interested in sort of the mystical elements of connection. And I would say, that those mystical elements are mysterious. We all want that. We all yearn, talking about daughters, we yearn for that connection, but we can't make that happen because in my
sure.
opinion, it's a conversation.
Mhm.
It's a contract between myself and my mother. So she has to participate. I can't just demand her to show up. I wish I
Right.
could. Um,
Yeah.
Right.
but I've
Yeah.
had enough, dreams of her and inner knowing, and I'm very psychic, so I
Right.
hear her a lot in my head. I talk to her every day. I have her pictures on my desk. Um, so I cultivate that relationship still, and she passed in 2007, and I write a little bit about this too. There there are people who think, you have to let go, you have to move on.
Yeah, you do
Um,
mention that. Yeah.
and I hate that. And I was told that so many times that somehow I was impeding my mother's growth if I didn't let her go. And I thought, well, that makes no sense. She loved me
Mhm.
and I loved her. So why would she want me to forget about her and not have that connection?
Mhm.
And believe me, I had a lot of arguments with people about this. It was extremely hurtful. I think
Mm.
it's a very hurtful philosophy that people have about that. And the other thing I would add is, how do you know? You know, that that's a whole nother world. We don't understand it. We're not experts. So to think that you could come up with some kind of protocol for connection is not true. It's just, in my opinion, it's just not true.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think a lot of it has to do with maybe cultural conditioning and individuality and your own connection that you've maybe had with your mother. It's very complicated because your relationship with your mother is totally different than what I had with my mother and what Bernice had with her mother. And I imagine that goes across genders. And so it's no one size fits all. So I agree, this all maybe bleeds into some of what you write would pertain to how sons feel or transgender. And maybe not all daughters can relate, but I wanted to get back to the point you made about the compassionate care that you wanted to advocate for after your mother's. What was it about that, what you saw and experienced with your mother during her time in the hospital that sort of prompted you to maybe rethink things, come up with different questions that people might want to ask themselves when they're in the grieving process. And I found it very interesting that you had doubts about the Dr. Kubler-Ross's stages of grief and how they may not really work for everyone, or you might have a different way of looking at them. If you wanted to touch on that a bit.
Well, thank you, Linnell. That's a big chunk
Yeah,
of
sorry.
to talk about. No,
That's
that's
like
okay.
3 questions in one.
No, that's all right. I will say for the first question, my mom was very sick. She had a very rare cancer. We kind of zigzagged across the country. I spent 10 years in oncology centers, um, too many clinics. And although there were some really good doctors that I really liked, um, unfortunately, there were too many. I wouldn't even use the word bad. I would just say unethical, doctors who were inappropriate, who were rude, who were dismissive. And my mother was a very smart woman and could advocate for herself. And um, I mean, I was at a hospital with a very famous doctor who was taking care of my mother, and he was really rude to her. And I was in the room, and I kind of I made a comment. I just said that's really inappropriate to talk to her like that. And um, I didn't yell or anything, but I was pretty calm. And he was dismissive of me until he found out at the time I was working at Brown Medical School in Rhode Island. And then when he found out I was at the medical school, he actually apologized to me. Um, but I was upset by the way she was treated, and I thought about what about all the women who couldn't advocate for themselves, who didn't have a daughter, who could speak up, or a son, or a husband. So I contacted, there's a wonderful woman who I love. Her name is Dr. Gauri Anandaraja, and she works at Brown, and she's an expert in spirituality and medicine and compassionate care. And I contacted her because I was in Rhode Island at the time, and we became really good friends, and she became a mentor. And later, I spent some time with Dr. Christina Pacholski, who wrote the foreword to my book, who's the head of GWISH, George Washington Institute for Spirituality and Health. And I love both women. They're just wonderful. So I became very interested not only in advocacy, but I wanted to train medical school students. And I ended up luckily, at the Dr. Kiran Patel College of Osteopathic Medicine. You know, Dean Wallace, who's wonderful, hired me to work in humanistic medicine. So I became very involved because I thought the way to change the culture is to be in the culture. So teaching medical students for the last, I don't know how long now, 15 years, I guess, um, gives me hope for the next generation. So that's one part of it. Secondly, you mentioned Dr. Kubler-Ross, who I admire. I admire her work, but her stages of grief were not meant to be used as a model for grief. They were kind of adapted, but even she said they were not to be used. like that. She interviewed people at end of life about their thoughts about death and dying. And she also never asked about mystical encounters or spiritual encounters. So this kind of delineation of all of these steps, which has been universally adopted by everybody, as the stages of grief. Yes, those can be stages of grief, but you don't progress from one stage to the next, to the next, to the next, and then at the end, acceptance and you're good to go. It doesn't work that way. It's a dance. So you go back through all of those stages, and all of those stages, I hate to say it, but it doesn't end,
Yeah.
does not
Mhm,
end.
And just
mhm.
quickly for
Yeah.
people that may not know off the top of their head, the stages are denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and then acceptance. And yeah, they don't move through linearly in a mechanical manner. You know,
Right.
they sort of bleed into each other, and maybe some are not felt at all or at different times. Yeah, so okay. And what about your survey? You did come up with different questions. Or Bernice, did you want to ask something
I'll
first
go right
before
ahead
we
while you're on this. I'll jump in right after.
Okay, yeah, you came up with new questions.
I did. I did. I decided that I would create my own research. So I sent out a survey to women. I asked them about their mystical encounters, if they had any,
Mhm,
how did it show up? These encounters, was it through presence or inner knowing or dreams or visions or signs? I really wanted some validation because I had been experiencing some of those things. I wanted to know who helped, if they thought grieving ever ended. Um, let's see, what else did I ask? I wanted to know, what did they do that helped empower them? When I asked about what helped. Um, so I was really interested in kind of getting background information from a large group of women, from all different backgrounds, all different
mhm,
ages, because I wanted to see what could help me,
mhm,
basically. And
Mhm.
I have a whole chapter on the research because I think it's important. And
mhm,
I couldn't find any research that actually asked women about what was helpful or talked about the spiritual revelations that they might be having
mhm.
or gave examples, what advice would they offer to other women. So I thought, I'm going to create my own.
Yeah, I imagine that would be a good journaling exercise for anyone maybe going through grief to answer those questions. You have a whole section in your book of stories. Um,
Oh, I
yeah,
think I hadn't really thought about that. I do suggest journaling, but I hadn't thought about that for the research study. But that's a great idea. Thank you.
yeah.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I think,
Well,
when you're writing, as you know, it's sort of you're led, so you
Mhm,
can get information that you may not have intellectually,
right,
and grief is not something you can talk about necessarily intellectually.
no.
right.
It's somatic.
Mhm,
Yeah, you mentioned
absolutely.
a couple of times and leading right into this, which I was personally very interested in, was the sort of mystical aspect to this whole experience of someone passing and then as you say in your title, eternal bond, and that has not been even asked of people for the most part of their
It's not been what, please?
asked. People have been asked about those experiences of anything that might be understood as mystical. Um, but that was a very big part of your book. And there was a section there, I believe, on the mother, maybe archetypal mother or a sense of the
Mhm.
sacred mother.
Hmm.
Um, I was interested in if you had anything particular that you would like to say about that particular section of uh, of the importance of this for the mother-daughter bond and in the process of this eternal connection. What was there that came up in people's experience that connected with this kind of divine or inspired imagery, etc.
Well, I've always been enamored with Mother Mary. Um, Even though I'm Jewish, I've had a lot of encounters with her. Um, and I thought, wouldn't it be interesting? I've done a lot of research on her. I wrote my dissertation on Mother Mary, and I thought, oh, she is the archetypal mother, whether you call her Buffalo Woman or the
Right.
goddess or whatever, however you want to frame her. Um, so I wanted to write about her, a little bit about my experiences with her. And then I remembered years before I had gone to the oldest shrine. I love to visit shrines to Mother Mary. I've been doing that for years and take pictures of her and take pictures of her statue. And I continue to go to churches
Hmm.
because I like the energy. And
Hmm.
when I went to this church in Florida, um, I interviewed a group of women who were paying homage to the Virgin Mary. And I asked them about, what it is about her that was helpful. And I share that in the book. They talk about she's the ultimate mother. She's always there. She provides comfort and support. And I love that. I just
Hmm.
love that. And I wear actually, probably can't see it on
Oh,
camera, but
yes.
I
Yes.
wear Our Lady of Guadalupe
Yes. Yes.
that my mother bought me on
Uh-huh.
vacation, and I I wear it all the time.
Wonderful.
It's very sacred to me. So I thought that women could relate, regardless of, like I said, regardless of the label, however you want to call her.
Sure. Sure.
Um, and knowing that I could have support from the ultimate mother was very reassuring to
Yeah.
me and
Yeah.
comforting because
Right.
I really felt abandoned.
Yeah. Would you um would you be able to share with us maybe a little experience that you've had with her that you would feel comfortable sharing? Or as you said, I've had experiences. I wonder
With
if
Mother
there's
Mary, you
something,
mean?
yeah, if you feel comfortable sharing that.
Um, Probably not in detail because it's
Sure.
private.
Sure. Sure.
But I will say for me, when I go to churches or cathedrals, I can feel her energy.
Hmm.
It's a very soft, gentle energy. And um, I was told, I mean, I can share one thing because I write about it. I was told years ago, um, oh, I don't know, 30 years ago, 25 years ago or something, I went to the Grace Cathedral when I lived in San Francisco, and there was this
Hmm.
beautiful statue of her. And I was looking at her, and I was told telepathically that I would write a book about her. And I just started laughing. I was really inappropriate. And I just said, no, you got the wrong girl. I'm Jewish. I don't know anything about you. You want somebody else. You don't want me. And years later, um, I wrote my dissertation on Mother Mary and
Yeah.
wrote a book about her. So I think that's really funny. At the
Yeah.
moment, I didn't really appreciate it, but I will say, there's this amazing church in Santa Fe, Our Lady of Guadalupe Chapel, which is really beautiful. And what's so intriguing about it is that in the center of the chapel, where there would normally be Jesus, right?
Hmm.
There isn't. It's a beautiful painting of Mother Mary.
Mm,
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
thought, oh my God, that's amazing. I've never seen that before.
mm.
So I
Yeah.
go there a lot just because I think it's a beautiful chapel, and again, I like the energy.
Yeah.
It's nice.
I don't know if you've been to Guadalupe, Our Lady of Guadalupe in Mexico, and outside of Mexico City.
I have not.
I
Have you
have,
gone
I
there?
have, I have, and It was quite a encounter when I opened the door, but the same thing. Of course, it's a huge cathedral, huge cathedral.
Yeah.
Uh, but the visual, when you open those giant doors, she's right there, and it's clear who's present here, and that. So it's a
Wow.
that what you're talking about in this other smaller church is so, and maybe that's why it's designed in that way. It picks up on that same pattern of energy that is in the original in Mexico. Yeah, that's fascinating.
Oh,
Yeah, I didn't.
that's interesting. I hadn't thought
Yeah,
about that. Wow, I'm
yeah.
jealous that you went. I would love to go someday. I think that would
Well,
be.
I'm sure you can. I'm sure you can. Yeah.
Well, Santa Fe is beautiful too. They have
Have you
gorgeous.
been to that church also, Linda?
Not if I have, it's been quite a while when I was a
See,
child, but
right,
yeah, I just love Santa Fe. And yeah, this is the divine energy, right? The divine female energy, whether you call her Mother Mary or White Buffalo Calf Woman or what other, what any name. From any culture really, they all have their symbols or archetypes of the divine feminine. I'm wondering, you said that you felt abandoned. Would you feel comfortable expanding on that a little bit, or is that also too personal?
Yeah, I mean, after my mother died, I felt very alone. We were very, very close. Um, and we became closer through the years as I was her, advocate and caregiver. And it's not unusual as a caregiver to become closer, to your moms. And I write a little bit about that. But I was so bereft. I mean, I cried every day for a year. Um, my dad didn't know what to do with me, really. I mean, he finally suggested I go see a therapist. But I couldn't even verbalize my pain, really. I didn't feel like I had the support from my family or my friends even. I didn't think anybody really understood what I was going through, so I was reluctant to even share it. I did eventually find this amazing therapist who really helped me. Um, and I remember, even my mother's best friend, one of her best friends, she had quite a few, not best friend, but a good friend, came over maybe a few months after my mother had died, and she said, "Oh, you're just a mess. Nobody's going to want to go out with you. You're not going to have any friends." I mean, she was horrible. And she was
you
a
talk about
mother.
that in your book. I remember reading that in your
Yeah,
book.
she was a
Yeah,
mother. And I told my father how offended I was,
Mm.
that she didn't understand. Because all I wanted to hear was, your mother loved you. Your mother loved you so much. She thought you were the apple of her eye. And, whatever. I needed to hear that. And I didn't hear that. Um, so that's why I started talking to other women. And
right.
I, I had one encounter. I remember being in Whole Foods and I saw this woman who looked like my mother. My mother was
Oh,
beautiful, like a
uh-huh.
really beautiful woman. And she looked like her, and I went up to her and all I said was, my mother had passed and how striking the resemblance was. And she gave me a hug. She didn't say a word.
Mm.
She just gave me a hug,
Mm.
and
Wow.
it just made the day for
That
me
really,
and so
that
much
really,
to me.
yeah, that met you.
A
That met you.
stranger would
Right,
be so kind and compassionate. And that's what I needed that. And
right,
I was not getting that.
right, right.
Um, so yeah, I felt horrible.
And
You know.
that goes to our cultural conditioning, where we're told to move on and cry in private. And you write a little bit about the healing power, the spiritual healing, really, of tears and water, and how water shows up in a lot of creation myths around the world. And tears are very healing spiritually. And we're just sort of conditioned. I was shocked actually to read in your book. I didn't know this, that the Catholic Church eons ago, however long it was ago, outlawed, or whatever the term is, tears, crying out loud in at funerals. I guess they wanted more of a stoic presence. I mean, that's just
Yeah.
so, and then what we do to boys and men, where they're not allowed to cry at all. I mean, that's just so damaging. So yeah, let's delve a little bit into that, the healing power of tears and water.
Well, I was lucky. I met um, Dr. Bill Frey, who is like a leader in crying and research on crying and crying behavior. And I interviewed him years ago when I lived in San Francisco, and he's written a book about crying, and he's like the ultimate researcher on the topic. And I thought it was really interesting that the actual chemical components, when we cry out of grief and when we cry when we're cutting onions, the chemical components are completely different. There's more protein in when we're crying for grief, tears, which I thought, wow, that blew my mind. I thought that was pretty fascinating. Um, so yeah, I mean, I agree with you, Linnell. There's a big taboo about crying. We're kind of told to be brave and shove down our feelings, and it's a hurtful mythology, because crying is really healthy and important. And as I said, I don't cry that much anymore. I wish I did when I need to, but I don't. But I think, I spent a full year crying after my mother passed, literally every day for a very long time. And my dad passed away within, oh God, it was close to a little over a year after that.
Mm, mm,
And that was a real tragedy because it was medical malpractice. And so I just cried all the time. And um, I think, at least for me, when I cried, then I was exhausted, but I also think it was cumulative caregiving for such a long time and that I had
yes,
not taken care of myself.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Um, so I needed to get out the crying, and also, taking baths, taking showers, sitting in a hot tub if you have one and you like it. Water is very recuperative. Um, one thing that I did, because grief lives in your body, it's very somatic, which I want healthcare providers, particularly physicians, to think about, when they're talking to their patients. But one of my friends was lovely, and she gave me a massage every week. She did a spinal massage, and I couldn't talk really, and I didn't want to verbalize what I was going through. It was really personal, and I couldn't. And I cried during the massage, and it was incredibly healing. It was really healing for me. So, I think everybody should find what works for them.
Hmm.
That worked
Hmm.
for me. Walking every day. I think to remember, you're not your grief. You are grieving,
Hmm.
but you're not your grief. And
Right.
one thing that really sustained me and still does, my mom told me in a vision when I asked her about where she was and what was going on, she said to me, "You get to keep your heart,"
Yes, you said that. Yeah.
which is an amazing statement, right?
Yeah.
That's just incredible. So I cling to that. Often I have days where I'll ask my husband, like, where is she?
Right.
I miss her
Yeah.
so much. Where is she? And he'll say, she's here. She's here. Don't worry. She's here. So, finding ways to really honor that bond, I think is
Hmm.
important. And what I do or have done may not speak to what you would want to do, and that's great. Find what works for you.
Right. Right. But the whole crying thing, I think, speaks so much of the wisdom of the body. Our body holding energy and releasing energy and allowing our energy to move through us and allows for uh, that sense of healing and acceptance and all of it can really move you in your interior place of how you are encountering your experience. And the body knows, if I may say it in that way, what is what's the best thing for you, as you say, to find what works for you. But our body is like, well, literally right here.
No,
Yeah,
you're right. The body knows. The body knows sometimes even before our head, our intellect.
absolutely. And you were saying, like there are really no words for this. Well, I already have to go up to my head to find words, and your body is expressing it, not non-verbally. It's expressing all of uh, that sense of knowing what it is and expressing it before it gets to our brain, where we kind of can then get it out in words, which is already removed from the experience. So
You're
that's
absolutely
wonderful
right.
sharing.
Yeah, moving on, I think, doesn't mean forgetting, and I think that's kind of a misconception that we have in our culture where when people say, your grieving time is over, you've been grieving long enough, move on, blah, blah. I think, like you said, Janet, it's finding what works for you, allowing yourself to feel and grieve and cry, even if it's, for 10 years, however long. And it's more like letting it work its alchemy within you. Grieving is a part of love, so you don't want to ignore that or suppress it. And by letting it work within you, you carry it, it changes you as a person, doesn't it? You grow, you become wiser, hopefully. uh,
Yeah,
and then,
I mean it has to because I think, and you're right, grief is love, and I would never let go of her.
yeah.
No matter who tells me, why would I do that? The bond is eternal. Why would someone who loved you stop loving you just because they've passed away?
Mm-hmm.
There's another consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
She's still here in some way.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know exactly all the ways because I don't know what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, I think it's really important. And the other thing I'd mention, it's also really important to find support.
Mm,
If you're going to talk about your mom, if you'd like to do that, find somebody who will support you and listen and be kind and compassionate. Because often, you know, you had mentioned, Linnell, how grief changes you. People want you to go back to what you were, and you can't.
Mm-mm.
I'm sorry, you can't because you're not the same person.
Mm-hmm.
You've experienced something else and it's a transformation. So, trying to find supportive people that you can surround yourself with, um, being kind to yourself, understanding that, yeah, things have changed. And I still have moments of deep grief, of waves of deep grief that I can't necessarily control that just happen. And then sometimes, I feel bad, but then I'm appreciative that I have this love, and I talk to her every morning. I talk to her whenever, I need to. Um, but I think, you're right. Our culture doesn't really, they don't permit grief after a certain time because it makes them uncomfortable, you know, and
right,
and that's
right.
another reason why I teach death and dying, and I started the Sidney Project because I wanted to educate medical students not only about death and dying, but I wanted them to reflect on their views about it so they don't project their views into the patient encounter. I think that's really important. And
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. you're offering, I'm listening all that you're sharing here with us today, and I'm feeling like you're offering to all of us, but to the medical world and to this compassionate care and to yourself as well, a great service, a great service,
Well, thank you.
a
That's
great heart
lovely.
service of really how to move through this difficult, particularly time in your life that has different nuances and twists and turns and such, and some
Hmm.
parts more intense than others, and so forth. But you're offering, ways of how to navigate it in ways that just regular folk can understand, and I really appreciate that very much so.
Well, I thank you for that. That's wonderful validation. I wrote this book a while ago, and it's gone through several
Mhm.
iterations. And I was fortunate. The editor at Llewellyn was really lovely and really understood what I was trying to do. And it's kind of a different book for Llewellyn.
Yes,
They're
yes,
more
yes,
well, they do different things, but they're
yeah,
known more for, books on witchcraft and magic. And so I was very pleased that they were interested in, offering a book that had a lot of research and a lot of credence and included women's narratives. So I'm really proud of it, you know.
yeah.
It was
Well,
hard to write, but I'm really proud of it.
I'm sure. I'm sure.
Yeah, and we're coming to a time of year too when a lot of people might be feeling, this is the
Mm-hmm.
holiday season, the end
Mm-hmm.
of the year. People might be feeling losses. I know I am, of a loved one that has passed or just no longer in their life. So yeah, this is very helpful. I'm wondering if there are, was there one or two narratives in your book that perhaps touched you more than others, or that stuck with you, or that you'd like to share?
Oh, well, I'm sorry for your loss.
Yeah, my
I
father
don't know
passed
what you're
away.
going through, but
Yeah,
I know what loss is.
yeah.
Um, I would say when I first did outreach, I connected with a number of women's groups and grief groups, etc., and kind of put out the call for people who wanted to write narratives. So, um, I was very careful I only wanted to choose narratives that were hopeful and empowering. And not that it didn't have, any kind of ugliness in it, because caring for somebody you love or losing somebody, I don't know that I'd use the word ugly, but it's upsetting, of course. Um, but I didn't want to just hear somebody's narrative about all the horrible things that happened, because I lived it. And why do I want to hear about that again? It's too close to home. Um, I would say, there's a wonderful narrative written by a woman who lost her mom. Her mom was killed by a drunk driver when she was young, and her dad remarried and kind of dismissed, her mother, really. She didn't know anything about her mother, and it was very tragic. And she was able to find out more information about her mom after, when she was older, and um, to kind of reform that bond, which I thought was really beautiful. Um, Another woman who had lost her mother, this is an amazing story too, was pregnant, and she had a midwife, and she gave birth around the holidays, and the midwife was not available, the woman that she knew, and had, I guess, contracted with. So the person that showed up had her mother's name, and she said when she was holding her baby after she had given birth, she really felt like it was her mother's eyes that were watching her,
Mm,
with the baby. And that just gives me chills.
mm.
I just thought
Yeah,
that was
yeah.
so beautiful and so moving. And so validating for this woman.
Right.
Um, so again, I was very, I have a lot of narratives, and I was really sorry not to accept all of them. But like I
Right.
said, I really didn't. I really felt that it was important for women to read words of other women that were empowering because, like I said, I wrote the book because I couldn't find this book. I couldn't
Right.
find anything that really helped me. So
Right.
why would I give or want someone to buy a book with my name on it that would just make you feel worse? You already feel horrible. I would never want that.
Right. 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 So there's a sense I have uh, that in a way, the whole grieving process is in itself a kind of prayer. I think you made reference to that in a general sense, and um, I just wanted to know if there was anything more that you'd like to say about that place of of, of grieving as prayer
I think it
in
is a
your life.
prayer. I think it's a prayer and a yearning, and a blessing. And I like to look at it in that way, that it's a prayer. I mean, it's really a prayer to be united again with the person that you love, and not necessarily, when you die, but having that communion, being appreciative of the
Hmm.
connection.
Hmm.
So I think it is a prayer. Um, and not that I don't get angry. I mean, there are times when I feel really bad that, I just had a birthday and
Sure,
um Thanksgiving, and
sure,
although it
sure,
was
sure,
great, my husband's really wonderful, I miss her. I miss my dad. I wish they were here,
sure, sure,
you
sure.
know.
Right.
Yeah, I
A
think
way of,
a lot of it's maintaining that spiritual connection, and I keep going back throughout our conversation to your story of the woman in the grocery store. Just spirit working, the divine feminine, your mother, whoever, working through strangers, even. The way she embraced you. I thought that was really beautiful and touching. She could have acted in any number of ways, and a lot of cultures are very comfortable keeping a connection and honoring the dead. We have the Day of the Dead, the Mexican
Right,
culture,
right.
and
Well,
you write about the indigenous a little bit, and so how can we, in more traditional, religious you know, traditions, honor that without maybe feeling like we're appropriating indigenous culture.
well, I would never speak as the expert
Mm.
of indigenous culture, but I know a lot of people, a lot of Native American medicine women, because I'm in Santa Fe and
Mhm.
I've been fortunate to meet them. I think probably the most important thing, well, before I say that, I know one woman wrote at length about she really felt her mother's spirit when she went to church. That's really where she felt her. And maybe you go to temple, or maybe you go to a mosque, or maybe you do a cleansing ceremony or Olympia, with an
absolutely,
indigenous
absolutely.
healer or a curandero. Um, I think, I mean, if you are interested in indigenous culture, and certainly they do honor, the ancestors, just like the Hispanic culture and the Jewish culture, it's not unusual. I would ask people, I would find people. Um, I talk to a lot of people from all different religions because I want to know more about what's helpful for them. So I think, it's not a one size all. I think it's you're not appropriating another culture if you ask permission and say, hey, I'm really interested in what you do. Could you share that with me? Would it be okay if I did that? It's
Okay. Yeah.
Well, and you do
And I,
write about the keening of the Celtic,
pardon me.
the keening, I think it's called the Celtic
Yeah.
tradition, which
I
is
thought I thought that was amazing, but in the Celtic tradition, they were called keeners, and they were women, young women, who were taught at an early age to, cry and scream and act out, and that was their role. And
mm,
it's almost like a Jungian archetype of grief,
yeah,
for people who couldn't. I mean, not everybody can be expressive enough
yeah,
about
yeah,
their grief. And that's okay. That's why I urge people, find a way
mhm,
and find something. Maybe it's through art that you can
right,
express your grief, or
right,
through
right,
dance, or, lighting a candle and saying a prayer.
right,
I don't know what
right.
would work for somebody else. I just know
Right.
what, was helpful for me.
And that crying, women crying, is also in the Jewish tradition, if I recall. That they would gather and be. I don't remember the correct term for it in Hebrew, but there would be a gathering of women, particularly, to cry and to hold that space and create that power and that ritual and that potential healing. Yeah, it's beautiful.
In fact, there's I mention it in my book. Martha Graham, who is the mother of modern dance, who I love, and she's in my Dance Was Her Religion book. But anyway, she did this piece, which you can find on YouTube. It's called Lamentation. And
Mhm.
I think it's from like 1931 or 1932. And it's short, maybe 5 minutes, maybe a little shorter. And I urge people to look at that because it's probably the best representation of the somatic aspects of grief.
Yeah,
And it's really, really, it's amazing and
yeah,
beautiful.
I did watch that because
Oh, did you?
yeah,
What
I
did you
did.
think? What did you think,
I
Lynette?
thought it was pretty powerful. Yeah. Yeah,
yeah,
very expressive and a bit abstract, but I saw the representation, the somatic,
Hmm.
body grieving. Yeah, so remind what is her name? And it's on
Her
YouTube.
name is Martha Graham,
Okay.
and the name of the piece is Lamentation.
Yeah, that was good.
world famous Martha Graham, of course. Um, uh, yeah, and I'm so glad you mentioned the arts also. As in a general course, art forms are always the ways to express the inexplicable. The experience that is beyond the confines of language, or what's underneath language, one might say, depending on how you want to talk about it. Uh,
Yes.
yeah,
Yes, art
yeah,
is wonderful. Art is a very helpful healing tool. And it doesn't have to be
absolutely.
pretty, You can crayon,
Right, right, right,
you
right.
can use a little coloring book, or just throw some paint on a canvas. It doesn't really matter.
Mhm.
Um, but
It's
I
wonderful.
think it can be incredibly helpful.
Right, exactly, exactly so.
And it's also a way to
Really,
track your grief. If you draw every week
mhm,
or paint or whatever, you can kind of get a sense of, how you're feeling.
right,
Um, yeah, I mean, I'm not an artist. I would write before I would draw, even though my mom was an artist. But yeah, I encourage people to use art, especially because for people who can't verbalize,
right.
it's as you said, it's, below, behind, beyond language.
Mhm.
Right.
You're absolutely right.
Uh, I've really enjoyed our
Yeah.
conversation, Janet. It's been lovely to be with you, and so appreciate our being able to come together and talk through these life experiences that's common to all of us, one time or another, common to all of us.
Well, I appreciate both of you. And I
Thank
really
you.
appreciate the opportunity to, talk to you. And yeah, and I hope, people will find the book really helpful. And as you mentioned, you know, Linnell's particularly because of the holiday time, it can be, I have a whole section on tools because I
Uh-huh.
wanted to give people like tools and not
Right.
just, oh, and she loves you. Yes, she does. But what can you do in the moment,
Yeah.
when you're
Right.
feeling really awful? So I think that's really important too.
Yeah, that's so helpful. Janet, thank you so much. Before you go, we wanted to give you an opportunity to tell our listeners where people can find you, find out more about you, where can they get the book, and also if you have a favorite quote that you would like to share, either yours or someone else's. We'd be happy to hear that.
Oh, anybody who's interested in the book, if you go to llewellyn.com and type in the Eternal Bond, you can find it. You can also find it at Amazon.com. It just came out a few weeks ago. Well, if you go on GoDaddy sites and put in my name, Dr. Janet Roseman, I'll come up.
Okay.
Okay.
Um, and yeah, I mean, I'm excited about the book. I think I'm going to read something from, I mean, I have a lot of quotes that I like, but my dear friend Jane Grossenberger, who is in the beginning of the book, she passed away from cancer years ago, and she is a wonderful, wonderful woman. And I lost somebody who I really loved. And she wrote me this letter, which I wanted to include in the book because it was so helpful to me, because she had lost her mom when she was very young. And I am going to, I'm going to just read a tiny, tiny bit from the letter. And she said, wear some of her jewelry, be your magnificent self, and she will tag along in your bones, or in an expression, or when and where you smile. Make a ritual and lay down her burdens, acknowledge her sufferings, and make them disappear. You will imagine the best way to go to the next avenue in the same world. With love, Jane.
Mm, beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank
Thank
you
you
so
so
much.
much.
It's been a
Yeah,
pleasure. Pleasure to be with you. Thank you.
well,
Thank you.
thank you. I really appreciate both of you and allowing me this opportunity to talk about my mom.
Of
Um,
course. Of course.
so
Thank you.
thank you.